In this talk, I'll be presenting some of our work on privacy-preserving matching of different data types using probabilistic data structures. Okay, so that's the outline of my talk. First, I'll be giving a brief introduction to the privacy-preserving data matching problem, the threat model, and the two categories of techniques used. And then I'll describe probabilistic data structures and how they have been used for matching of string and categorical data. Next, I will present our methods for privacy-preserving matching of numerical data using Bloom filters, mobility data using count-min sketches, and textual data using counting Bloom filters. And finally, I'll conclude with an outlook to future research direction. So, identifying matching or similar entities from multiple databases held by different organizations without disclosing the actual personal and sensitive attribute values is required in many applications. Example applications include healthcare applications such as similar patient matching, clinical trials, and personalized healthcare, national security applications such as crime and fraud detection, and identity theft detection, and business or finance application, for example, for targeted marketing, online recommendation systems, and loan approval systems. So in all these applications, large databases held by different parties or organizations need to be matched in order to identify the set of common or matching records across databases. However, growing privacy concerns and confidentiality issues preclude the sharing or exchange of personal and sensitive information across different organizations, and therefore we need to conduct the linkage in a privacy-preserving context. So the privacy-preserving context for the data matching problem requires that the parties should not be able to learn about other parties' data, and the consumer of the protocol, for example, a researcher or an organization who will use the output of the matching protocol, should not learn individual parties' data as well as non-matching or non-common records. And an eavesdropper who gets access to the communication channel or to the shared data should not be able to learn any party's data. So we assume the honest but curious adversary model, where the parties follow the steps of the protocol honestly, but they are curious to learn about other parties' data by collusion or by inferring the data from which they receive from other parties. And collusion is a privacy risk in multi-party protocols where two or more parties collude with the aim to learn about other parties' data. There have been two categories of techniques used for privacy-preserving data matching. The first category is cryptographic methods, for example, secure scalar product or asymmetric encryption schemes. These techniques are highly accurate as no perturbation of data is conducted, and they are provably secure, but the major drawback is that they are computationally expensive, making them not applicable and practical in real applications that involve multiple large databases. The second category of techniques is probabilistic methods, such as using probabilistic data structures, for example, Bloom filters and variations, sketches, and cuckoo filters, or using perturbation methods such as differential privacy, k-anonymity, and noise addition. So probabilistic data structures are highly efficient for processing, storing, and computation, but they are acceptably inaccurate. That is, they allow a small percentage of false positives, which could be negligible given the significant reduction in complexity. And these can be used for privacy preserving as they provide controllable privacy depending on the trade-off between privacy and accuracy. That is, the lower the accuracy, the better the privacy gain is, and vice versa. So our methods and most of the recently developed methods fall under this second category of techniques. So let me now talk more about the motivation of using probabilistic data structures, as they have widely been used for privacy preserving data matching. So remember, we have had different storage starting from tape, hard disk drive, solid drive, and to memory. So along these, the speed increases, ease of use increases, but the storage decreases. So the question is, how can we do more in memory? And the answer is using probabilistic data structures. Probabilistic data structures have initially been used for set membership, as they provide efficient computation with predictable level of inaccuracy. So due to this level of inaccuracy that gives uncertainty about a true matching or true mapping in the Bloom filter space, we can use, or in a probabilistic data structure, we can use these for privacy preserving techniques. And Bloom filter is one such probabilistic data structure that has received much attention in privacy preserving data matching. As we have seen in the previous talk, it is a bit vector where all the bits are initially set to 0. Then k hash functions, independent hash functions, are used to hash map each element in a set into the Bloom filter by setting the corresponding bit positions to 1. For example, hash mapping a set that contains apple, orange, berry, and pear into a Bloom filter of length 9 bits using 2 hash functions is shown in this example. So we set the 2 corresponding bit positions to 1 for each of the elements in the sets. And as we can see, there are collisions between bit positions where 2 different elements, for example, orange and berry, are mapped to the same bit position. And these collisions could lead to false positives. And depending on the length of the Bloom filters and the number of hash functions, the false positive probability can be determined. So now, to identify the set of matching or common elements in 2 sets, S1 and S2, we need to apply a logical AND operation on their Bloom filters, and the resulting vector contains 1 in bit positions where only if the 2 Bloom filters have 1 in those bit positions. If at least sorry, how to make this full screen? Okay, that's fine. That's fine, yeah. Okay, so the resulting vector contains 1 in bit positions where the 2 Bloom filters have 1 in those bit positions. Now, to test the membership of an element, all the corresponding bit positions which result from applying the hash function on that element should return 1. If at least one of the bit positions contains 0, then the element could not have been common in both the sets. So in this example, pear is not a common element because this is pear actually. So one of the bit positions contains 0. So that's not a common element. That's not a matching element in these 2 sets. That's how we do categorical data matching using Bloom filters.
I have a hunch F5 might go to full screen. F10.
Only F at the same time.
Okay, so that's for string data matching. If we do the matching and masking in a similar way as we do with categorical data,
So have the percentage display, right? 268%. We can change that. So go to the
Control minus.
If you just press Control minus, it'll make it a bit smaller, so everything you fit on the screen, I think, is an equivalent suggestion.
Yeah.
New laptop.
How do you just get out of the full screen mode?
I have a lecturer.
Who uses a button?
Whenever there were technical difficulties with
Okay.
Yes.
you know how to use a computer.
So for string data matching, if we do the masking and matching in a similar way as we do with categorical data, by hash mapping the set of q-grams. So the problem with that approach is that the resulting Bloom filters will not be matching, and it will be matching only if the two strings are exactly the same. However, to account for data errors and variations, we need to use an approximate matching method. So Reiner and group introduced an approximate matching method for string data using Bloom filters by hash mapping a set of q-grams into the Bloom filter. So in this example, the two strings Peter and Pete are first transformed into a set of q-grams, and then these sets are hash mapped into two Bloom filters. Now to calculate how similar these two string values are, we need to apply a token-based similarity function in the Bloom filter space, such as the dice coefficient similarity, which is calculated as 2 into number of common one bits found in both Bloom filters, which is 5 in this example, divided by the sum of 1 bits in each of the Bloom filters. So that gives a similarity of 0.9 in this example. Okay, Bloom filters are simple and efficient, and the false positive probability for encoding n elements is 1 minus e to the power of minus number of hash functions times n divided by the length of the Bloom filter for each hash function, and therefore to the power of k for all k hash functions. And this is controllable by tuning the parameters L and k. So they have effectively been used for categorical and string data matching, but no work has been done on matching of different data types using such probabilistic data structures. For example, numerical data, mobility data, textual data, and other data such as time series and image data. So in the next, I will present our methods for matching numerical, mobility, and textual data. So first, let's begin with numerical data matching. Numerical data include integer, for example, age, floating point, for example, body mass index or weight and income, and modulus data, which have finite range, for example, day and month values in date and degree. Numerical data matching is required in several applications. A perfect example is privacy-preserving similar patient matching, where the aim is to group or identify similar patients according to some criteria. For example, patients with similar age, body mass index, and cholesterol level, to allow clinical trials, personalized treatment, and health research studies. So we have developed several masking and matching methods for different numerical data. Now, the problem with considering numerical data as string or categorical data and hash mapping into Bloom filters is that we do not preserve the similarities between actual numerical data in the Bloom filter space. For example, if we encode two integer values 29 and 30 by hash mapping their q-grams, for example, unit grams, then the resulting Bloom filters will not be matching because there are no common elements in the two q-gram sets. So we propose to hash map a set of neighboring elements for each numerical value to allow fuzzy matching. For example, to hash map an integer 26, we hash map a set that contains two neighboring values before 26, which are 24 and 25, and two neighboring values after 26, that are 27 and 28, and the numeric value itself. In this example, we set the number of neighbors to 2 on each side and the binning distance as 1. Similarly, we do the hash mapping for other numeric values 25 and 27 as well. So in this way, we will have more common elements in the sets and therefore the Bloom filters will have more high similarity. So the more similar the two numerical values are, the more number of common elements will be in the two neighboring value sets, and therefore the resulting Bloom filters will have higher similarity. We have developed similar masking and matching methods for floating point and modulus data as well. And experiments conducted on real health data sets shows that there exists high correlation between the actual numerical similarity, that is the similarity calculated between actual numerical values, and the similarities calculated between Bloom filter encoded data. And as you can see, the Bloom filter encoded data are larger than or equal to the actual numerical data. So if there are no collisions in the Bloom filter mapping, then the similarities will be equal. And if there are collisions in the mapping, then the similarities will be larger than the actual similarity due to false positives. So that's about numerical data matching, and let's now move to mobility data matching. Location-based services and researchers require mobility data to learn or calculate probability density distributions. However, exchanging or releasing individuals' mobility data raises privacy issues. Example applications are transport planning and management, privacy-preserving recommendation systems, and business applications, for example, targeted marketing. So existing techniques fall short in providing a sound solution. A naive approach is to simply aggregate all the mobility data, which is highly accurate as no perturbation is done, but it has privacy leakages of individuals' mobility traces as shown by a recent attack method. A differential privacy-based method improves privacy by adding noise to the mobility data at the cost of utility loss. So we propose to use the probabilistic data structure count mean sketch for encoding mobility data. So count mean sketch is an array of D rows and W cells where all the cell values are initially set to 0. For encoding a mobility data into a count mean sketch, D independent hash functions are used, and we increment the corresponding cell values in each of the D rows by 1. And to calculate the count or density value of an element, we get the minimum of all the corresponding cell values. So the false positive probability is less than or equal to 1 over the width of the array, and therefore in order to get the count estimate closer to the real estimate, we need to set the parameters, the width of the array and the number of rows accordingly, which I will not go into details in this talk. So these are some of our experimental results on real Momo dataset and San Francisco CAP dataset. And as you can see, so SMDA is the simple aggregation method, DPMDA is the differential privacy-based method, and P4MOBI is our method. And so we can see that our method outperforms the other two by achieving better results in terms of both utility and privacy, which is measured as reconstruction error of a recently proposed attack method. So we have also worked on textual data matching, which is required in some privacy-preserving applications, for example, similar patient matching to match clinical notes or medical reports that contain text data, or business applications to summarize and compare different documents. However, no work has been done using probabilistic data structures for text data matching, and it has several challenges. So in contrast to standard data, text data contain large amount of information, and therefore we need to use appropriate and effective pre-processing techniques, as well as masking and encoding techniques, where we have to deal with the trade-off between scalability and quality. So we first applied pre-processing on the text data to extract a set of tokens to be encoded, and we consider three aspects for choosing the tokens, which are representative, frequency, and informative or uniqueness. So this diagram shows the flow chart of our pre-processing steps. So we use the text processing techniques such as tokenization, stop word removal, and stemming, and then we calculate the TF-IDF scores, and finally we chose M tokens with the top TF-IDF scores. Then we use the probabilistic data structure counting Bloom filter to encode the set of extracted tokens from the text data, along with their frequency or count information. And a counting Bloom filter is an integer array where all the values are initially set to 0. To encode token from the set into a counting Bloom filter, we increment the corresponding bit values by the count value of that token. So in order to calculate how similar two text data are, what we propose is to use the dice coefficient similarity between the counting Bloom filters. To calculate this dice coefficient similarity between two counting Bloom filters, we first get the minimum count value in each bit position and then sum these minimum values. Then the similarity is calculated as 2 into sum of the minimum values divided by sum of the counts in counting Bloom filter 1 plus sum of the count values in counting Bloom filter 2. So that gives a similarity of 0.77 in this example. So this is our initial approach to textual data matching, and more experimental studies using real health data sets is still underway. To conclude, so we have presented different masking and matching methods using probabilistic data structures for different data such as numerical, mobility, and textual data. Research directions include developing cryptanalysis attack methods on numerical Bloom filter, counting sketches, and counting Bloom filters to study their privacy vulnerabilities, developing privacy-preserving matching techniques for other data, for example, image, time series data, and dynamic data, and investigating other probabilistic data structures such as cuckoo filters and hyperlog for privacy-preserving data matching. And finally, a framework of probabilistic data structures for privacy-preserving techniques, which would allow us to study the space-time accuracy privacy trade-off in different techniques and their applicability for different applications. So that's the end of my talk. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thank you.
So for your textual data, what people normally do is you take the TF-IDF and you compute the cosine distance.
Sorry?
Compute the angle, the cosine distance. But in your case, you have taken the tokens with high TF-IDF scores and then convert into a dice, well, counting Bloom filter and do dice. What's the relationship between that dice on the counting Bloom filters and the cosine distance on the original?
Okay, so we use the TF-IDF only to select tokens, like informative tokens.
Yep.
And then to preserve, to encode this set of elements into a privacy-preserving space, we use counting Bloom filter. So we can apply different similarity functions in the counting Bloom filter space, but in order to replicate because we generally use dice coefficient in the Bloom filter space, so we try to use an enhanced version of that dice coefficient similarity function in the counting Bloom filter space as well.
just to clarify, so you're actually using the original tokens, not the embedded TF-IDF space.
No, yeah, we are using the original tokens to hash map, but we increment with the count value in the.
Can I ask a second question? So for your numbers, integers and things like that, so I think the range encoding is quite interesting. Before you try that, I guess the first thing to try is probably the binary encoding of those integers, which has some properties, but it has kind of discrete jumps. For example,
I think we've actually done it. I think in the beginning it doesn't. Again, you might have two numbers which are very similar, but they have 2 bits in common, like from 8 to
well, 3 to
from
4.
7 to 8,
3 to 4, for example.
You have no similarity. So I think that was the original idea, and we abandoned that very quickly because
Right.
from 3 to 4, from 7 to 8, there's all these jumps, and so you don't get a nice meaningful similarity.
There may be a talk on that in 2 talks' time.
That was 3 4 years ago. And again, with this, it's the different parameters with integers, the range, how far you can go. There's a lot in the paper, tricks on how many elements you take, especially the floating points, what's the kind of intervals and all that.
So what do you do for floating points?
What we do for floating points, we kind of have.
It's a similar approach, but so it only depends on the binning distance. So we change the binning distance because for floating points, even the small point values matter. So we use the parameter called binning distance. So to get a proper set of neighboring values.
Okay. If you have 5.6 at the binning distance, you have 5.7, 5.9.
So you can
generate neighboring, and then we have to bin them.
So you can take a set and then do the cover set, and then use the cover.
Kind of, yeah, exactly.
Has there been much work in looking at how much extra information is in the counting bloom filter, the cuckoo filters from a privacy
Yeah, so
point of view?
that's one future, because there's no attack methods on these data structures. So, I mean, for example, numerical bloom filters could be easily vulnerable because it has a range, right? So that's one direction of future.
More questions? Thank you very much.